Hello, BookTube. Well, if I'm back to BookTube, as I am, then I'm back to reading you a poem every day, aren't I? So we're going to read a poem, and once again, we're sticking with the FSG Poetry Anthology, edited by Robert Galassi and Robin Cresswell. Just a naked hardcover that'll be in your bookstores. I mentioned the other day, just offhandedly, that the price is $40. That is cripplingly high, as a number of you mentioned. But your library will probably have it as well. I've been enjoying it. It's just a collection of, it's not an overburdened collection. It's not like you get 10 works from each poet. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that it has a little bit of a relaxed pacing to it. The poem that I chose today is by John Ashbery, who is absolutely legendary. And this is a poem from 1995, so 30 years after he first made his name. It's called The Problem of Anxiety. 50 years have passed since I started living in those dark towns I was telling you about. Well, not much has changed. I still can't figure out how to get from the post office to the swings in the park. Apple trees blossom in the cold, not from conviction, and my hair is the color of dandelion fluff. Suppose this poem were about you. Would you put in the things I've carefully left out? Descriptions of pain and sex and how shiftily people behave toward each other? Nah, that's all in some book, it seems. For you, I've saved the descriptions of chicken sandwiches and the glass eye that stares at me in amazement from the bronze mantle and will never be appeased. That is The Problem of Anxiety by John Ashbery. And you can sense right away, I'll bet, even though you can't see the poem, you can sense right away my number one problem with this poem, which is that it's not a poem. It's not a poem. It's a few lines from a letter to a friend, maybe a postcard. There is no reason for this to be standing up vertical, as a friend of mine used to say. There's no reason for that to happen. There's nothing poetical going on in here. The lines don't do it. The word choice doesn't do it. The pacing doesn't do it. There is no scansion to speak of. It's the only reason that people would call this a poem is because of its form, because of what it looks like, because it's vertical instead of a paragraph. And there are paragraphs in here. so prose poems, so-called prose poems, utterly ridiculous, are not off the table here. But why this isn't one, I have no idea. And what about the poem itself? The problem of anxiety, well, I don't know where that comes in the poem. The narrator in the poem is saying that he's been living in squalid towns for a long time, for 50 years. And I was telling you, not much has changed, he says. He's addressing someone. He's been living in these dark towns that he's been telling you about for 50 years. For some reason, despite the fact that he's been living in this town for 50 years, he does not know the route from, what was it? The post office to the swings in the park. I am assuming that I am not supposed to take that literally. But what other way is there to take that? What other avenue is open for reading this poem other than completely on face value? If there is one, I don't see it. I don't see any level operating here. And not only that, that would be homely enough, but I guess excusable. But then the narrator of the poem says that that the poem isn't about the things that are on his mind, that he's leaving those things out because they are what? No, that's all in some book, it seems. No idea what's being referred to there. No idea why the poet is telling his interlocutor that he's not going to write about the things that are on his mind, that he's intentionally withholding all sorts of details from that interlocutor and hence from us, from the reader. I won't say that this is a departure for me when it comes to John Ashbery. I don't think the man ever wrote a line of verse, so-called verse, that I liked, and mainly for the same reasons that I encounter in this poem, in a brand new anthology, which is that it's not poetry. I virtually never recall any poetry coming from this person. So that's our poem for today. It's The Problem of Anxiety. I had a lot of other problems with it, not anxiety related, but maybe we'll do better tomorrow. I think I'll stick with this anthology for a few more days. We might find something lyrical, something accessible, something that won't provoke a Steve rant. One way or another, we'll find out next time. Thank you, BookTube.